Isabella Tran pressed her palms against the cold metal of her new locker, letting the clang echo through the mostly empty hallway. The first bell had already rung, and the scent of lemon disinfectant still lingered in the air, a strange contrast to the pine-scented breeze that had followed her all the way from her mother's old sedan. Milridge High was nothing like her last school in Seattle. The crisp mountain air in Utah felt lighter, but everything else seemed heavier. The stairs, the expectations, the silence between strangers. At 16, Isabella didn't look like much. She wore a simple black hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers that had seen too many rainy sidewalks. Her long dark hair was pulled into a messy braid, and a pair of silver stud earrings were her only concession to style. But hidden beneath that unassuming frame was 8 years of intense martial arts training. She was a second-degree black belt in Shotokan karate, but no one in Milridge knew that, and she intended to keep it that way. Her mother had begged her for one thing before the move: no more trouble. After a rough year involving school fights, none of which she started, and a broken wrist that had landed a boy in the ER, Isabella had promised to lay low. Her mom, Lan Tran, had taken a nursing job at Milridge Regional Medical Center, hoping the small-town atmosphere would offer them both a fresh start. But first days were always brutal. She stepped into her English class just as attendance was finishing. 25 heads turned toward the door as Mrs. Willoughby, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with a thick scarf looped around her neck, paused her roll call. "Oh, everyone, we have a new student joining us today, Isabella Tran from Seattle. Please make her feel welcome." Isabella gave a quick nod, her throat dry as she mumbled a polite, "Hi." She took the only available seat by the window, the eyes still following her like searchlights. She could already hear whispers behind her. "Asian kid? Probably some genius." Did she say Seattle? Bet she thinks we're all hicks. Same song, different town. As she sat, her fingers brushed the edges of her notebook. It was worn from use, filled with calligraphy strokes and kata diagrams she had drawn during long nights at her old dojo. Sensei Nakamura had taught her discipline, not just technique. He often said, "True strength is knowing when not to use it. Your power is for protection, not for proving something." Milridge didn't seem like the kind of place that understood subtle strength. Students here knew each other from birth, from church, from town picnics and middle school football games. Isabella knew she was an outsider the moment she stepped into the front office that morning and saw the receptionist struggle to pronounce her last name. After English came biology. She was paired with Chloe Ramirez, a quiet girl with thick glasses and a nervous smile. They barely spoke until Isabella broke the silence with a question about the lab instructions. That led to a soft-spoken conversation about how the teachers at Milridge were either overworked or indifferent. Chloe had moved here from Albuquerque the year before. She understood how small towns had invisible walls built around old names and shared histories. "It takes a while," she said, adjusting the focus on their microscope. "They stare until they decide what box to put you in." Isabella didn't respond, but she understood. Her box would be Seattle snob or quiet girl with attitude. What they didn't know was that she'd spent her entire childhood being underestimated, until someone pushed too far. As they left biology, Chloe gave a small warning. Avoid the sports crowd, especially Nate Harwell and his guys. They run things around here, and they don't like anyone who doesn't play their game. Isabella just nodded, absorbing the information. Milridge High was a new maze, but bullies were always the same.
"Hey, you, freshman, you take a picture of me just now?" A boy, maybe 13 or 14, with oversized glasses and a backpack almost bigger than he was, froze. His face turned crimson. "No, I was texting my mom." "Let me see," Nate demanded, walking over with two of his buddies flanking him, Ben and Jordan Reyes, a tall, muscular forward from the basketball team. They surrounded the boy like wolves circling prey. The kid stammered, I can show you. Look, I wasn't. But Nate grabbed the phone anyway, scrolling through it with theatrical flair. Texting your mom? Aw, that's adorable. You want her to come pick you up and save you from the mean football boys? Ben snorted. Maybe she should send diapers next time. With a flick of his wrist, Nate tossed the phone back onto the table. It slid, then dropped off the edge and cracked on the tile. A ripple of gasps and laughter moved through the cafeteria. The freshman scrambled to pick it up, tears brimming in his eyes. Jordan snatched the kid's tray and dumped it upside down over his backpack. Oops, he said flatly. Slippery hands. Silence settled over the cafeteria like a held breath. Teachers at the far end of the room looked away. No one moved. No one except Isabella. She didn't rise. Not yet. But her gaze locked on Nate like crosshairs. Her body sat still, but inside, she was calculating distance, weight, movement. Chloe whispered across the table, "Don't." Isabella didn't answer. She watched as the freshman gathered his spilled food with trembling fingers, humiliation radiating off him like heat. She could hear Sensei's voice in her memory. You fight only when there's no other choice, but you never forget who you're fighting for. The warning was clear. Nate wasn't done. Not with the freshman, and maybe not with her. She went back to her sandwich, but her appetite was gone. Third period took Isabella down the main hallway where the social hierarchy of Milridge High was on full display. At its center, parked beside the trophy case like lions at a watering hole, stood the varsity football players. Their jackets were unmistakable, green sleeves, gold lettering, and stitched names that might as well have been engraved on the school walls. Nate Harwell, the quarterback, was at the center of the circle. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and broad-shouldered in the way that made doors seem smaller when he passed through them. His light brown hair was cropped short, and his voice carried over the chatter like a megaphone. I swear, man, Logan's face when Coach made him do extra suicides looked like he was going to puke up his ego. Laughter rippled around the group. Logan, a junior who had apparently missed a pass in last Friday's game, stood nearby, trying to smile like it didn't sting. As Isabella walked past, she caught a fragment of a comment from one of the others, Ben Waters, lean and sharp-featured, with a voice like nails on glass. Yo, check out the new girl. Seattle discount fashion in full display. Someone else chimed in. She looks like she lives in a library, or maybe behind one. The remarks weren't loud, but they were just enough to be heard. Isabella kept walking. She didn't flinch, didn't slow down. Her footsteps were silent on the polished linoleum, just like Sensei Nakamura had taught her. Walk with presence, not noise. It was a skill that had made her nearly invisible in sparring matches, and it served her well now. She knew better than to react. Reacting made you a target. She'd learned that lesson too many times. Still, her fingers curled slightly as she passed, nails pressing into her palms. Lunch was worse. Milridge High's cafeteria was an ecosystem ruled by unspoken borders. The athletes took the central tables. The cheer squad hovered nearby like satellites. Theater kids clumped near the vending machines. Freshmen exiled themselves to far corners. New students like Isabella? There was no assigned territory for them. She spotted Chloe sitting alone near the window again and slid into the seat opposite her without asking. You made it, Chloe said, her voice light but tinged with concern. Barely. Isabella unwrapped a tuna sandwich and kept her eyes on the tray. Chloe nodded toward the middle of the cafeteria where Nate Harwell was lounging with his crew. They've been talking about you. I know. Isabella took a sip from her water bottle. They're not subtle. Just be careful. Nate's the kind of guy who doesn't like it when people ignore him. or challenge him. Especially not girls. Especially not girls who don't swoon when he looks their way. "I'm not here to challenge anyone," Isabella said. "I just want to make it through the year." Before Chloe could respond, a sudden commotion exploded near the lunch line. Nate had stood up. His voice boomed across the cafeteria. 2 days passed. In that time, whispers about the new girl spread through the school like wildfire. Not because Isabella had done anything, but precisely because she hadn't. She'd walked past Nate and his crew without flinching. She ignored their comments. She offered no reaction, no retaliation. And to a group of boys who fed on attention and fear, that was the ultimate insult. By Thursday, the tension was boiling under the surface. Chloe warned her again. "I think they're planning something, just be ready." "I always am," Isabella said quietly. That afternoon, during gym class, the perfect opportunity came. Coach Bennett, a stocky man with a clipboard and a permanent sunburn, had a fondness for dodgeball, especially when he didn't want to supervise too closely. He split the class into 2 teams, each side with a mix of athletes and everyone else. Isabella was placed opposite Nate, Ben, and Jordan. As the first whistle blew, Isabella ducked, pivoted, and moved like a shadow. Balls whipped past her but never touched her. She didn't throw. She didn't need to. She wasn't playing to win. She was watching. On the other side, Nate wasn't focused on the game. His eyes were locked on her, calculating. 10 minutes in, Isabella was the last on her team. Nate, Ben, and Jordan remained on theirs. Coach Bennett was half asleep on the bleachers. "Let's finish this," Nate said, grinning. 3-on-1. Should be fun." Ben lobbed the first ball, fast and low. Isabella sidestepped without blinking. Jordan followed with a high throw. She ducked, let it sail over. Then came Nate. He didn't throw the ball. He charged with it. "That's not allowed," Chloe yelled from the sidelines. But Nate wasn't listening. He rushed Isabella with the ball gripped like a weapon, aiming to hit her point blank. What happened next felt like time split in 2. As Nate lunged, Isabella pivoted. One foot slid back, her body lowered. Then, a blur of motion. She caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and used his own momentum against him. He crashed to the floor, stunned. Gasps erupted across the gym. Before anyone could react, Ben rushed her. A wide-armed swing, sloppy and emotional. Isabella dropped low, swept his legs out. He hit the mat with a grunt. Jordan hesitated. For a split second, he wavered. She didn't give him time to decide. One clean front kick, controlled, powerful, right to the chest, enough to knock him backward but not injure. Silence. Utter, dead silence. Isabella stood in the middle of the gym floor, not panting, not shaking. Her hoodie had ridden up slightly, revealing the black belt knotted over her gym shorts. Coach Bennett, wide-eyed now, dropped his clipboard. Chloe's voice broke the silence. "You didn't know, did you? She's a second-degree black belt." Nate scrambled to his feet, his bravado gone. You could have broken my arm." "I didn't," Isabella said. Her voice was steady, even calm. "You should think about why." Nate looked around. His crew lay scattered, and the entire class stared, not with fear, but something new. Respect. Maybe awe. Maybe shame. The principal called Isabella into the office later that day, but so did the guidance counselor, and surprisingly, the gym teacher. No one punished her, because the security cameras had captured everything. By the end of the week, the footage had quietly made its way through every student's phone. No caption, no music, just a silent recording of one girl taking down 3 bullies with precision and restraint. She hadn't started it, but she had ended it. By Monday morning, Isabella Tran was no longer just the new girl from Seattle. She was the girl who stopped Nate Harwell. But more than that, she was the girl who didn't gloat, didn't fight for attention, didn't retaliate, even when she could have. That silence spoke louder than any victory lap. Nate didn't return to school for 2 days. When he did, he kept to himself. The bruises had faded, but the shift in his posture hadn't. No more loud taunts in the hallways. No more sarcastic commentary in the cafeteria. Something had cracked, not just in his confidence, but in the way others looked at him. Without fear, without reverence. And that terrified him more than anything. Coach Bennett, to everyone's surprise, started using terms like mutual respect and conflict resolution in gym class. It was awkward, almost comical, but it was something. Even more surprising, Nate approached Isabella that Friday. It was just outside the music wing, between classes. She was leaning against a locker reviewing chemistry notes when she heard him. "Tran." She looked up. His tone wasn't mocking. It was careful. "I wanted to say thanks." She blinked. "For what?" "For not making me look worse than I already did." Isabella studied him. He wasn't squirming. He wasn't faking it. "You made yourself look that way," she said calmly. "I just stopped you before you did worse." He nodded, like he expected that answer. "Yeah, I know." A pause. Then, "You ever think about starting a self-defense club here?" Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Not for fighting," Nate added quickly. "Just, there are a lot of kids who get pushed around. I was one of them once, before I became the one doing the pushing." That surprised her. "I didn't think you were the type to reflect," she said. He shrugged. "Getting flipped onto your back by someone half your size can be enlightening." Later that week, flyers appeared on hallway bulletin boards. Empowerment through movement, a new kind of strength. Sponsored by the Milridge Self-Defense and Confidence Club. Open to all students. No experience needed. At the first meeting, over 30 students showed up. Not just the quiet ones, not just the bullied. Even a few former bullies came, unsure of how to start over but showing up anyway. And there stood Isabella, in a plain t-shirt and black joggers, bowing respectfully at the front of the room before she began. "This isn't about fighting," she told them. "It's about remembering you don't have to run." Chloe joined the club too, helping organize and keep attendance. She'd come a long way since that first quiet lunch. Now, she stood beside Isabella, not in the shadows, but as a leader in her own right. Something had shifted in the school. Teachers noticed fewer hallway altercations. The assistant principal, usually flooded with disciplinary referrals, had time to start a gardening club. Students held open doors more often. The cafeteria, once a daily battlefield of hierarchy, began to feel almost neutral. No one declared Isabella a hero. She didn't want that. She just wanted peace. But even peace, sometimes, needs a catalyst. And that catalyst had arrived with a cracked phone, a stolen lunch tray, and a single quiet decision. Enough. Spring came late to Milridge. Snow still clung to the edges of the soccer field as students filed into the gymnasium for the annual assembly. Normally, no one paid attention. It was just awards and announcements. But this time, something was different. A banner hung from the back wall, Student Leadership Spotlight, honoring changemakers. Principal Gomez took the mic. She was known for her no-nonsense tone, but today, her voice carried warmth. "We often talk about leaders as those who speak the loudest," she began. "But sometimes, true leadership is quiet. It moves through action, not volume. Today, we recognize someone who didn't just stop a fight. She stopped a cycle. She gestured toward the bleachers, and slowly, reluctantly, Isabella stood. A wave of applause began, hesitant at first, then growing. Chloe was clapping the loudest, and to everyone's surprise, so was Nate. Isabella didn't walk to the front with a smile. She didn't pose for photos or offer a speech. She simply nodded once, accepted the small plaque they gave her, and returned to her seat. No victory lap, no spotlight craving, because Isabella Tran never came to be seen. She came to protect. And in doing so, she taught Milridge High a lesson many adults still struggle to learn. That courage isn't in domination, it's in restraint. It's in the choice to stand up, even when your voice shakes, even when silence would be easier. Later that afternoon, as the hallways emptied and the echoes of applause faded, Isabella walked past her old locker. A sticky note had been taped to it, written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you. I don't cry when I walk in here anymore. M." She didn't need to know who M was. She just smiled, peeled off the note, and tucked it into her chemistry book, between the pages about kinetic energy and Newton's third law. Because even physics agreed with what she knew in her bones. Every action has a reaction, and hers had finally made things better.